It's the H.454 conference on May 30th, a little before noon or whatever time it is, 11:30. Getting back together. I think we're gonna walk through. You're gonna walk through the second half of your, or how do you want to do this?
First,
I guess we did. Go ahead.
Yeah, first I'd like to say that I am somehow I've lost my pen again, and I wonder if I could have that pen in front of you quick. Or this one right here, thank you. And if I could just have that box for the remainder of the conference, that would be great, thank you. So we walked through sort of the ed finance policy pieces of this yesterday. And as I slept on it, I just wanted to really sort of affirm the need for us to have people be better off on the other side of this, right? Like that feels like a core value that I'm carrying into this committee, that taxpayers are better off on the other side of this. And
I know you are also thinking students. I kind of.
Yes, absolutely, students. Yes. But when we're thinking about the second half of the bill, and then I think the education policy side, very much students are better off. And I just want to make sure, and it's very important that we do all the pieces at once because it's interrelated. But sort of for me, go no goes on the tax stuff is really that taxpayers are better off on the other side of this, right? And I think that's true for all of us, but I just wanted to state that at the outset. So we walked through all of it yesterday. So I think it's up to you. Do you have questions? Are there more we could offer you? Do you have thoughts you want to share?
No, I think we raised a couple of the issues that have to get thought through. We have issue of the start date when things get put in motion. We have the issue of for a number of members, the issue of being able to spend something less than 100% if they're running an efficient district. Talked about the need for the high school weight. And have Scott, a couple of anything else to add to that?
I think, yeah, the CTE weight, I think also maybe, we can just to try to unlock something that maybe, flows in some other things that we can unlock. If we can agree on a date of implementation of the foundation. I know that, the governor wanted 28, and this bill, I think it's FY30. Is there another year that we can agree on?
I think that's a great question. I sort of walked in this morning being ready to talk about the fiscal side and not talk about the calendar yet. So I wonder if we could, I imagine that however it moves, everything would need to move and we can adjust the effective.
Okay.
I will say that I think staff is very carefully not including effective dates in redrafts of this right now.
Okay.
Because that would be a waste of their energy. Can I ask you a question about the less than 100%? I understand why you would want districts that are effective and efficient and delivering quality services to students and having good outcomes to be able to spend less than 100% of the foundation formula. It's a new idea to me. I sort of heard that it was floated in the Senate maybe last week, but it's a new idea to me. And I can't fathom how that would actually work. Do you have an idea for how it would work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would just, it would be up to the electorate of the district to determine. I think every district out there wants to provide an excellent education. I think they definitely have criteria that flows out of AOE, things that they have to provide. And I think we're probably going to see some changes to that over the next couple of years. Mm-hmm. And then I see it as the school board would tell the voters, we think in order to provide the education that you want us to provide, that we need to spend this much money and ask for 100% of the EOP. Other
Mhm.
districts might be, we need to ask for the 100%, and we also need to do a little bit of supplemental
Mhm.
spending. And then some districts, other districts would be, we think we can do this for 90% or 92% or whatever, that they think they can, you know, if they feel like, hey, we can do everything we need to do, provide the excellent education that our voters expect, satisfy all the requirements from AOE, and that they would have the ability to, you know,
Mhm.
basically make a plus or minus decision from the AOE.
So we spent really an embarrassing amount of time in Ways and Means talking, calling it supplemental district. Someone just turn it off on the PowerPoint. Thanks. Naming it supplemental district spending, but would it like, you're sort of conceptualizing it as sort of like supplemental district underspending or something like that?
I think it would just be,
Okay.
they agree to accept some percentage of the EOP. I mean, if you do supplemental spending, you're accepting 100% of the EOP, right? Then you're just on top.
Mhm.
If you're not above 100%, you would just say, we would like to accept
And we would,
95%.
and you would vote to do that.
Yeah, and they would receive a like percentage decrease. So if they spend 90% of the EOP, then their state tax, their district tax rate would be 90% of the statewide homestead tax rate.
So the supplemental district spending tax rate increase is not 10% more, right? It's set up differently than that. And so are you imagining it would mirror on both sides, or are you imagining maybe different systems, whether you're spending more or spending?
No, I think, you know, above, I think you're spending 10% more of the base. If you're not taking the full EOP, which is a weight structure, you'd be saying, we're gonna take, you know, 90% of the base and weights. That's how much money we're gonna take. We're not gonna take 100% of the base and weights. We're gonna take 90%.
Mhm.
And if our voters choose to take 90%, then our district homestead tax rate would be 90% of the statewide. It's a light percentage.
So how would that work with so we have the statewide grand list that is, so we set the tax rates for the whole state based on the statewide grand list in order to raise a sufficient money at the same tax rate. If you take 10% off one district's tax rate, that wouldn't necessarily equal 10% less spending because you have, right, you have different grand lists.
Yeah, no, and that's I think is actually a deterrent to a district to spend less. You know, JFO's done some preliminary analysis. They may not be ready to speak to it today, but that actually, you know, in almost all cases, if a district said, we want to spend 10% less and we want the 10% lesser tax rate, then the amount of money that they're foregoing is greater than the tax savings that they're achieving. So it does.
Is that true for every district?
I don't know if I'd be able to say
I mean, I guess we
every
can't.
district, but if in other words, it was looked at, if everybody did this, what would this mean? And it would mean that the foregone revenue would be I think far greater than the tax savings.
Well, if everyone did it, of course it would work, but
I think what Scott's talking about is, you know, the districts that are lower spenders now.
Yeah,
If those, if you did the analysis.
But it could be a district, I mean, it could be a district that's I don't know if we could account for that.
The problem.
I'm not arguing it, I'm really just
No, I
trying
think
to
Yeah,
figure out
sure.
how this
I
works at
appreciate
the
that.
11th hour.
Yeah.
problem that we're trying to deal with is right now, if we put in the weights, we've got towns that would be forced to spend significantly less per student. And everybody is still saying, well, in my town, I mean, you know, we've already made painful cuts. And then we've got towns that generally they're financially poorer towns who are not spending what the numbers say they should spend. Some of those probably are doing a really good job. And I think, you know, until we get to the final districts and allay that, but there is a decent chance that when we get to the end, that some of these financially poorer towns, the people don't have the money. How are we going to deal with that? And I think we're saying, well, if your homestead exemption is such, but the combination of looking at that sheet and saying, my town's going to see a 30% increase in its tax rate if we went today. Right?
No, I understand I
And
understand.
I don't know, I think we may be dealing with a problem before it is a problem, but it is a present problem
Mhm.
with caucuses on both sides.
I mean, I really do understand the problem you're trying to solve, and I think it's an interesting solution to it. I really am just trying to figure out how to make it actionable. I appreciate the idea that the Agency of Education would sort of validate that they're providing, quality services, et cetera. And I appreciate the idea of sort of paralleling percentages up and down. I think that makes sense. I just, the tax rate discounts are confusing to me. That's all.
Yeah, I think the way you see it play out is that, you have your December 1 letter comes out, there's a statewide homestead tax rate. And then there's kind of a decision point there. We could either make that tax rate dependent on 100% EOP.
Mhm.
And then, it's set, and then if districts, and there's also and then if districts spent less, then we could, if you take a percent off that, what that would do probably creates a surplus in the fund for the next year. Or the other ways you could try to, the same thing we do now, you query these school districts in the fall, they tell you what they're going to spend. You try to zero that number in right there. And then depending on what actually plays out in the winter and spring, just like it does right now, the number may go up or down. Certainly locking in that rate would be a more conservative approach, would almost really guarantee a surplus for the.
I will say in the existing bill in all the versions that we've looked at, that rate and the supplemental spend rate are locked in the year before. So districts can do their budgeting based on advanced knowledge of that. And so I think that if we were going to do a supplemental an underspend rate, that would need to also be locked in the year before. I think it's one of the many areas of the bill before us where the math works significantly better with larger districts, right? Like, I think that our total spend with the foundation formula and the weights is lower with larger districts when we model that. And anything related to grant list equity, whether the ups and downs would work differently around the state, works better with larger districts. And if I am, I think some of the options on the maps in front of us next year, if we're looking at 40 districts, I think what you're proposing could get really messy in terms of what a 10% discount on a tax rate would mean in different areas of the state, right? In terms of the ability to contribute enough to the ed fund. But I haven't seen it modeled, so I don't know. That's just my instinct.
Yep.
But
I think it is a problem that we solve out.
yeah, I appreciate that.
I don't see a path for this.
Yeah, can you, more detail would help me think about it more, because really I'm just getting lost in how to do it and not whether or not it's a good idea right now. So if you could show me how to do it, I could think more about whether or not we think it's a good idea. And I don't know if that's like formal language or.
In the bill as we're looking at it,
Mhm.
somewhere in here, there is the supplemental spending above.
Mhm.
Do we still have any excess revenue generated going into the school construction fund, because originally we had, at least in finance, had talked about that money could flow back in to the bottom line and be used to lower tax rates, which
So-
might.
I think both versions of the bill have it. The first year that it's in there, it's used to make sure that the overs and unders cancel out well, and we can have stable tax rates year over year. And then the second year it waterfalls into the school construction fund, because in all the conversations we had for the first half of the session, one of the biggest red flags for everyone was, how can we do education transformation without school construction? No one was ready to tackle that. And so it was at least a nod to the idea of funding school construction. I think it makes sense. There's a lot to be said for it going to the bottom line. And one of the challenges with it going to the bottom line is when different amounts go to the bottom line in different years, we wind up with wild ups and downs. And I think we've ridden some of those lately.
Well, I would say, ideally, school construction would not rely on a
No.
unreliable funding source.
Yes, and I know third party at this table has concerns. Letters we've been sent
Mhm.
about guaranteeing or putting state money, especially at this point, in school construction. So, just try. I think part of it is that we are still all thinking in terms of our present schools, which will not be the construct.
No.
And we won't know until we have the time to map those new districts to be able to know what the impact will be on the lowest in these schools now.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a good chance that some of them could see a significant tax rate increase. Whether we want to let them spend less than what we say they need to spend.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, how do we deal with those towns?
100%.
Yeah, I mean,
We have in all of the, well, I won't say that, we have a proposal from us that includes your phase-in of tax rates and phase-in of spending, as well as our proposal for the homestead exemption, which, you know, as we saw on the blue and white chart, would help offset some of that.
And we can look
And I
at,
guess I would say, just,
Yeah.
I'm with Emily. I don't think any of us here are against this concept that you have brought up, but somewhat perplexed as to the details of how it works. And
We're glad to hear you're open to it. Yeah, it's open.
One thing you could do is, rather than the phase in the way we have it set up now, you could go 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, then 90. So you could just use that as the phase in. You could do it down the other side until you get to that.
I actually have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, rather than the 20%, and it would just do first year, you can spend 85%. Second year, you have to spend 86%. Third year, you have to spend 87%.
For 15 years?
Well, you get to 90.
Oh,
Get to 90, it takes the 5, it's the same 5 years, it's just a different way to get there.
Yeah.
It's actually simpler.
yeah.
Because it's just,
off the cuff, I think the sort of, that the default would be 100 and then permit law, and then the other two would be, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's an interesting
Yeah.
idea.
it's just simple.
Yeah. So I'd just love if you all could bring more details
Yeah.
on that, that would be really helpful. And I hear what you're saying about the CTE weight and the high school weight. It's, you know, as you know, it's not in either proposal, and the research doesn't tend to back up the need for it. And I hear where you're coming from, so I'm just gonna set that aside for now and keep on thinking about how to make the math work.
But the data does.
I don't know if I say that. I'm wondering about the other sections of the finance portion. I hear you offering additions to the finance portion, and I'm wondering if that means that you're accepting all the other finance portions that we offered, if those additions are there, or if you haven't had a chance to look at them yet.
I think it's more of the things that have to get
The big things.
Things that have to get added.
added. Yeah.
Okay,
I think we'd like the language that you put into this sparsity that
Mhm.
Senate, but I think the language that you put in there is
Mhm.
works better than what was in there for sure.
Thank you. Again, it was your language.
Well, but you guys made it better. Or Beth made it better, or John made it better. I don't know who made it better.
Everyone in the whole room worked on that sentence. And so I hear changes you would want to make to supplemental districts funding. That's heard, and we'll think about that with sort of further details that you offer. I have no idea what page I'm on. Thank you.
I mean, I thought, I liked what you did with supplemental.
Okay.
I think.
On the homestead exemption, do you have,
So this is the House proposal that's in here right now, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, you haven't been over that yet.
What page are we on?
It's such a good question.
It's one that didn't get highlighted, so we missed it last week.
I think it starts around 109-ish.
Section or page?
Page.
Yep.
Don't have a.
Oh, here we are. It's 110.
Thanks.
Man, this is your turf.
Sorry.
So this is your turf.
109.
So this is,
Section,
but
don't have 110 in
Oh,
my
you've got
thing.
the.
That's the old
Yeah,
one.
you've got.
Ah, all right, that will go get my other one.
Where is it?
It's in my,
Look at
no, I'll get
4.1.
my
Okay.
committee room.
Okay.
I'm in section 51.
How's it this?
I think we can focus
Um,
on highlighted, but which is not.
So this is the House passed version, except we used the we actually used, so the House passed version did not have a cap. We added a cap to this. It was actually lower than the cap that you all had, which was actually just because Julia hadn't modeled the higher cap yet with our construct. Would be very happy to meet. I think that the numbers might work better with your cap. In using your cap, I think sort of preliminary numbers look like the cost of that is lower than the cost that we talked about earlier. And so the cap is helpful in that way. Again, no one's kicked out of the program. It's just, it sort of maximizes the benefit. I don't want to be a broken record, but I think it's crucially important that Vermonters aren't paying more in property taxes on the other side of this. And the other thing that I would add is if a lot of this work and a lot of its programmatic work on the part of agency education really happens over the next number of years, including through our consolidation, then all the tax rates would go down, right?
Can you remind me, Emily, in this proposal, what is tied to it? What is or is not tied to an inflator in this proposal?
Everything's tied to an inflator.
So the 400,000 and
I
the
think so.
different brackets?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I feel like that was one of the greatest mistakes that was made 30 years ago, and I feel committed to adding to inflators to almost everything, everywhere.
Okay.
The other piece that is in here is a request to the Department of Taxes to study moving up to 175, because the fact that we stopped at 110 is really just because we didn't have the numbers to go up to really look at that. But I think folks, the general consensus seems to be around the building these days, that 175 is sort of when you brought in most regular folks, household, if we're talking about households.
We're talking about,
So what?
talking about a study.
When we're just talking about studying it, but really want to understand that to make sure that we're bringing in, middle class families. And our other tax credits tend to go up to 175, right? They do.
Oh, okay.
I mean, Ann and I have been spending time in another conference committee talking
Oh,
about that,
okay,
right?
okay. Oh, yeah, okay, now I know everything.
With Scott Mann.
What's that? Well, I think also in here, there's also my understanding is in here, there is enough leeway, when Jake and Rebecca were here the other day for tax, that they feel like they need to do some more work to really fine tune this. And I think what's in here allows for that work to
Yeah,
continue.
we have a lot of
Yeah.
years for fine tuning, and
Okay.
and we tried to be really explicit about that in the study. I think that's true across the board with this bill, but I very much have appreciated all the work that JFO and tax have done together to fine tune the original proposal to bring you this.
I mean, I think we can probably go with what's in here
Okay.
on that subject, I think.
Does going up to the, great, does the slightly higher cap of 425 that you all had in your original proposal work? This one has 400.
You put it in at 425.
I put it in at 400 here, but it was something of an accident, and your original proposal had 425.
I think 400.
Either one,
Either one, okay. I
425.
prefer 420, I think we'd prefer 425. Okay, thanks, great. Okay, so I'm gonna close that section up with that as, Thank you. Regional assessment districts, we have no differences between any of this, and that's tax department language, and so all good across the board on regional assessment districts.
Keep telling us which section we're in.
Thank you, sorry, section 62,
And,
page 142.
okay, well, wait a minute.
We haven't had even the beginning of a conversation about it, but it was. Okay. Okay. And just for formality's sake, all the miscellaneous tax provisions that we got from various places and that everyone agreed to at the bottom of the bill, they're mostly from the miscellaneous tax bill. We can have Kirby talk through them, or if you guys need anything.
It's all the same.
Yeah, it's the same. They were totally the same between versions. Okay, thank you.
Miscellaneous tax.
And so I think that brings, sorry, I'm going from easier to harder instead of going in order. I think the last thing on the finance section is the division of the non-homestead classification.
Is that in a study or is that?
No, that is that House proposal.
Get out and ask to have it studied.
Page 99, right there in the middle.
And we're saying,
Find it.
please do it and further refine how you're going to do it in the many years we have between implementation.
You define them.
We do define them, but we're also ask them to develop forms and have them come back with. I think we're very responsive to the tax department when they ask for changes.
Me, I'd be more comfortable with such.
This ability to really separate out these categories has been a pretty tough priority for us for a number of years. And we've done a lot of groundwork towards it. And I worry that if we delay it, we're gonna lose it as part of the overall timeline that's in this bill.
I would say it's not just our caucuses or our bodies, but Vermonters have to say, why aren't we separating these out? Property tax classifications year after year.
I would say of all, I imagine we all get a lot of email. And of the email that I get from throughout the state, which is significantly more than the email I get from my district, this is the top thing that people ask of me.
It's funny because I don't get it. I don't think it's still very funny. Yeah, but I understand that happens between. Yeah, but there's second homework. Well, we'll have to talk about this one.
Great. Okay.
And I guess I would also suggest maybe we take a lunch break, and then if you folks could put together some language maybe with Ledge Council on some of the things that we talked about, that would
Yeah, I think
help us understand
we
it
need
better.
to work on sending something back to you that looks a lot like what you've given us.
Yes.
Yep.
So I've heard that we've closed up a bunch of sections. What's still open is the tax classifications, and then the supplemental spending and some of the weights, as well as those two sections from the yesterday. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
This is all pending.
Yeah.
I haven't run
Of course.
giving up our tax homestead exemption system for yours by my people. Felt fairly strongly that they wanted to see it at the lower end. I will
Okay.
run this by them.
When do you want to come back?
It'll probably depend on their work with Ledge Council and JFO.
So let's, everybody wants to get lunch because I think many of us have missed the last one or two meals at least. And we need to get together with JFO. Get back together. Well,
Can we say just two?
to try for two?
I think
Let's please.
Okay, let's
we have
try
some
for
people
two.
that will get very upset if we're not doing this for 3 hours.
Yeah.